Hello, I'm Kirsty Young, and this is a podcast from the Desert Island Discs archive. For rights reasons, we've had to shorten the music. The programme was originally broadcast in 1998, and the presenter was Sue Lawley.
My castaway this week is a gardener. He grew up in a Yorkshire village. His parents saved hard to send him to a nearby boarding school, but he didn't enjoy it much and left to pursue a career out of doors. In the mid-50s, he went to work in and masterminded the Harlow Carr gardens near Harrogate, and it was here over the next 20 years that he made his home, making things grow where not much had grown before. He moved into broadcasting and writing, became a stalwart of Radio 4's Gardener's Question Time and a popular presenter of many television programmes, all of them concerning the living, growing things that he's loved all his life. If I'm depressed, he says, I just go and look at a flower. He is Geoffrey Smith. What does it do for you, Geoffrey, in that moment, the flower?
I think it makes you realise that we live in an artificial world, and the real world is the natural world, the world of nature. And you just need to look at a primrose and it puts everything in perspective. I was looking at primroses last Saturday night. I stopped at a little valley that I've loved since I was a youngster, where I used to go and watch the badgers. And the bluebells were in flower, and the primroses, and the ransoms, you know, the wild garlic, and the quiet. The only sound you could hear was birdsong and the noise of the stream. And I thought, I don't need paradise, the Yorkshire Dales will do for me.
And has it always been the same? You were born and brought up in Swaledale, weren't you? Has it always been the same, even when you were a little boy? Did it touch you?
One of the things I can remember plainly is the smell of the moor after rain. Have you ever smelt it, after a dry spell?
That sort of peaty smell.
That's right, the rain on dry earth. And it's the smell of growing things. And yes, my mother used to call me a wild animal. I had an intense love of nature. And I can remember her telling the vicar, what child would miss his dinner to watch red squirrels playing? And I'd realised that these red squirrels had a peculiar territorial instinct. And they would come down, it was a beech grove, and there was sphagnum moss, mounds of it. And one squirrel would come down when the one from another tree entered his territory, chase him like mad, and the one running away would run fast to begin with, and then realise that it was getting back into its own territory again. And it would turn round and the other one would run away. The chasing would become the chase.
What about your garden at home? I mean, did your father or your mother tend the garden, and what was in it?
Oh, my mother was no gardener at all. Can I tell you a story about my mother? There was a dry stone wall round the garden, a big tall one, and I very carefully planted antirrhinums into that. And antirrhinums grow in nature, in very dry places. And they just got established, they were just going to start to flower, and it's the only time I've ever known my mother do any gardening. The only time she took an interest in gardening was when it was on a plate and she had a knife and fork in her hand. And she went and weeded all the antirrhinums out. But my memory of home is an abiding memory. Always there were wallflowers under the sitting room windows. And when they were in flower in May, my mother used to open the windows and the perfume from those wallflowers filled the house. And scent is quicker than sight to sound to make your memory go click. It really is quicker than anything else.
It's all in the fragrance. So your mother was a wonderful cook. Your dad was head gardener at the big house. It all sounds very storybook, very idyllic, and I want to hear more. But let's hear about your first record.
And that is Moira Anderson singing the Rowan Tree. It reminds me of my grandmother, who liked to have a rowan tree and an elder, because she used to say, what is it? The rowan, the elder, and red thread, they hold the witches all in dread.
Moira Anderson singing Rowan Tree. Tell me, Geoffrey Smith, about the garden your father ran at Barningham Park, which was a sort of local stately home, really.
That's
wasn't
right,
it?
yes, the Millbanks Garden. That was a great place to grow up, and it was a great place to be educated in the fundamentals of gardening, because it was totally organic. The lord of the manor didn't want his, I can remember Sir Frederick saying, I don't want my vegetables dousing with chemicals.
How big was it?
The parkland where the rhododendrons and lilies and daffodils and things like that grew would be about, I should think, 30 acres. There was an enormous walled vegetable garden, fruit all round the walls, peaches, figs, nectarines, nectar peaches, grapes in the greenhouses.
Did you get to eat all these things?
Oh, yes, because that was part of my father's remuneration, which he never abused, that he got fresh vegetables.
But did he tell your father what to do in the garden, or did your father
no.
tell him what he was doing?
No, Sir Frederick would probably have told the people on the farm what to do, because he was a very keen farmer, but the head gardener was in charge, no question. Unless the garden is his, Sue, then don't put the man in charge.
So there'd be no resentment on his part, the part of your father, that he was putting his heart and soul into this garden, but it wasn't his.
Oh, but it is while you're in charge of it. Harlow Carr was mine. I got to be awfully autocratic there. I took no notice of the committee. If you're paying a professional to do a job and you've got to tell him what to do, sack him, lass. Don't encourage him, because if he's dependent on you for his knowledge of what to do, then he's not worth paying. That is true.
And did you, in your relationship with the big house, as it were, do, as was the custom in so many English villages in, I think, the first half of this century and longer, have that sort of annual cricket match?
Oh, that was when you could let the venom go. Not that there was any venom, but there was always the feeling that they thought they could do things better. The one thing they couldn't do was play cricket better than we could.
Well, you could fix the pitch, I suppose.
No, we had a good cricket pitch. They've got a super cricket team still at Barningham. I watched a young fast bowler there last Saturday. Oh, if he doesn't play for Yorkshire, I'll give up. But they were splendid games. The smell of linseed oil and new cut grass and that piece of the parkland. It's a gorgeous setting for a cricket pitch.
But you'd give them what for, would you?
Oh, my goodness, yes. Send for the stretcher bearers quickly.
Record number 2.
That's the Dawn Chorus. That is the only thing, because the music I've chosen isn't my favourite. It's all evocative, but the Dawn Chorus is. It's the only tune you'd never get tired of. Listen to this, switch it on, first thing in the morning on the desert island. Wake to Blackbird's song. If that doesn't bring a tear to your eye, nothing will.
The Dawn Chorus, and there was a cuckoo in there too. I haven't heard so many of those this year.
No, I think soon there'll be birds that will go on the endangered list. I think green plovers and I think cuckoos. Certainly, I went walking on the moors yesterday afternoon. I do every chance I get, and where in the past, even 3 years ago, I'd have been mobbed by 20 nesting plovers. I found one little wee chick, the size of a ping-pong ball, and I looked at that wee thing. It was totally motionless, except the wind was ruffling its down, and I thought of that wee scrap of life in the middle of the vastness of the moors, and it will be sad when we lose them. But it's funny, Sue, if ever I suffer from sleeplessness, which God forbid I never will, I will make a recording of hens going to roost, you know, that lovely crooning noise, and a wood pigeon cooing in the background. And if that doesn't make you want to sleep, nothing will.
It's all about smells and noises, isn't it,
yes.
your life? You've obviously always been a free spirit. It's no wonder you hated boarding school. Why was it so awful for you?
Well, I think initially, you see, my brother was older than me, so he was very much a senior when I went. and what was out of bounds to me was in bounds to him. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't go with him too. I couldn't understand why the bottom button of my waistcoat had to be undone, and why I had to have my cap on it. Futile nonsense. And I didn't like being confined on a summer evening and the quiet summer noises that I could have walked amongst at home. Instead, I was stuck in a dome, 3 stories up, looking out on the countryside of Teesdale, which is lovely in the extreme.
And longing to be out there.
And longing to be out there.
Did you ever try to run away?
Oh, no, except at Wednesday afternoons and Saturday afternoons when I wasn't playing cricket or rugby football. I walked the length and breadth of Teesdale, and it was only 6 miles from home, because and if I set off straight after lunch on a Sunday, by running very hard, I could get home, and then I could run very hard back again. That's how I got to be reasonably fit. And my mother used to make a sandwich tin-size Yorkshire. Have you ever had a cold Yorkshire pudding sandwich?
No, I
Eaten
haven't,
in...
no.
Oh, Sue, you haven't lived. And she used to make these, cut them in 2, and put slices of whatever meat they'd had for lunch in.
Well, between Yorkshire pudding, like the bread,
That's
slices
right.
of bread. I
That's
see.
right.
So was it then really that you decided you got to spend your life outdoors? Was that when you decided gardening is what I want to do?
At 14. No, I decided that I would be a forester, a farmer, or a gardener. And I went into forestry immediately I left. I was asked at 14 by my housemaster, Bentley Beetham, what I wanted to be. And I said, as long as I never have to work inside, that will do. I went into Forestry Commission. I cycled on the Stang, which is about 2.5, 3 miles from the village.
What's that, a forest?
Yeah. The great sweep right up on the Pennines. Those cycle rides to work. How I cursed having to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But those cycle rides live in memory, because sometimes the mist would be swimming in the valley and the treetops sticking above it as you climbed up, to see herons standing grey and motionless on the edges of the becks, to hear the curlew call and plover in the springtime, see the lambs coming on the fells in April, hear blackcock lecking, which there were on the Stang in those days, and to watch the slow evolution of the seasons.
Tell me about record number 3.
Oh, Harry James. When you're in boarding school, the only thing that speaks to you are the blues. Harry James, Tommy Dorsey, Jeannie Krupa, Fats Waller, they were the great men of music of my particular time. I needed the expression that the blues music gives, because that is haunting. Even when it's played at its jazziest, it's expressing a lust for freedom that no other music does. You will listen to it.
Harry James and his music makers playing St. Louis blues. Tell me about long netting, Geoffrey, because I think that's something you learned that first summer after leaving school. Just at the end of the war, this
Yes,
would have been, wouldn't
that's
it?
right. Yeah. Oh, yes. No. Well. Yes, that's right. Yes, of course. It's such a long time ago, and yet it's still vivid, because I can remember the first night that we went out. I don't know whose terriers they were, but we used to take 2 terriers, and the net must have been about 100 yards long, and you set it up on pegs down a forest ride, and then you put the terriers in, and they're supposed to go around and chase the rabbits into the net. But the first thing into the net always is one of these confounded terriers. I don't know, it never learned sense. And by the time you'd untangled that, of course, 50% of the rabbits had gone. But we used to long net and catch rabbits because they were a pestiferous nuisance with the trees. They didn't eat them, they bit the tops out, nipped them.
Then you went to work for your dad on a temporary basis, but then you stayed for 6 years, and he kind of trained you, really.
That's
that was
right,
your
yes.
gardening apprenticeship. It seems odd that you didn't take over from him in the end.
Oh, no. No, he would have been heartbroken if I had.
Why?
Wasn't big enough. He had grand ideas for my brother and me. Oh no, that would have been too restrictive. And I would have been bored out of my mind, Sue.
So you were more ambitious. You wanted a big project.
Not ambition so much as needing to expand my horizons. It wasn't ambition. I am singly devoid of ambition. What I do, I want to enjoy doing, and I want to do well. And it was my dad that noticed there was an advertisement in the Northern Echo, students for Askham-Bryan. They hadn't filled the number. And he said, what do you think, boy? He always called me boy. And,
this is Horticultural College.
That's right,
yeah.
Yes. Askham-Bryan, yes. The greatest horticultural college, undoubtedly. Because it's in Yorkshire.
Because you went to it.
That's right. And I applied and loved college. They pressed all the right buttons, whereas my father had told me to put potash on fruit trees. He didn't give me a reason why. He taught me how to graft. He didn't tell me about the cambium layers interlocking. And college told me about the chemistry of soils, about the reasons for things growing, about photosynthesis. And suddenly gardening became not just a pursuit, but a thing that was an ever-expanding horizon. And I have never been bored, so not with my job ever.
And you passed out with flying colours, all sorts of medals and awards. What did your dad have to say about that?
Oh, his face lit up. He walked on clouds for about a fortnight. My mother used to keep saying to him, "You can come down now, Fred. He's home."
Record number 4.
Oh, that is Glenn Miller. This is just, Sue, when the last dance of the evening at the village dance, and the girl in question had said, yes, you could take her home. And they put Moonlight Serenade on. If that didn't make your eyes shine, nothing would. You don't have to lift them out of the tin. They float onto the plate. Yes, she's a good cook.
And what about the gardening? Does she help you?
No, she's not interested in the slightest.
Or is she not allowed?
Thank goodness. No, I would encourage her. I mean, the weeding and the pricking out, I'd gladly leave someone else to do that.
I know you believe in organic gardening, and you've mentioned it several times. A lot of people would say they'd like to grow organically, but they just can't. You know, the slugs will eat your spinach or your hostas, the green fly and the black fly and the white fly smother your petunias or your roses, and the red ants ruin the lawn. You can't do it.
Not if you get the balance right, you can. You see, how I would ask those people that say you can't do it, how we did it at Barningham. There was no poison. The only spray we used was a tar oil winter watch, which is accepted as being organically based by the Soil Association. Everything else had to be grown on farm manure and compost. It was all...
So how did you keep those pests at bay then?
We had no problems. Harlow Carr was the same way. I did trials for the Royal National Rose Society for the whole of the time I was there. And people used to say, you've got greenfly on the roses. Now I'd say not for long. And they were judged by people like Miller Galt.
What, it just went away by itself?
No, the natural predators came. You see, if you start spraying, then you're going to kill the predators. You're going to kill the ladybirds. You're going to kill the lacewings. You're going to kill the hoverflies. In an organic world, there's a balance. You get a build-up of pests. You get a build-up of predators. And it all works. But once you start spraying, you kick. And when you kick the greenfly and the caterpillars out of the food chain, you're depriving blue tits, for example, of the food, the high-protein diet for the young. And once you do that, you've shattered a very, very carefully balanced ecological system.
So you would say to people, put up with the pests because eventually they'll take care of
There'll be
themselves.
a build-up. It'll take about 3 years to get your garden into balance, then you're home and dry. And your garden will be a lot more fun.
Next piece of music.
Oh, this is the Royal Regiment playing Distant Hills. One of my favourite walks is from Barnard Castle, Lartington, Cutherston, stop at the wee pub in Cutherston, have Whitby cod and chips, and the cod is so big that the North Sea goes down 2 inches when they pull it out, and then walk up to Rommelkirk. And I was about 1.5 miles out of Barney, and I heard the bagpipes. And there across the river, there was a man, there's a house that used to be a gamekeeper's cottage, and he was playing the pipes in full regalia there, and he was playing the Distant Hills, and the River Tees in the foreground, the great vista of Teesdale in the distant view, and the bagpipes, yeah.
The Royal Regiment playing Distant Hills. Now, Geoffrey Smith, Harlow Carr Gardens, the Wisley of the North it's been called, and that was where you eventually settled and stayed for 20 years, 68 acres on the edge of Harrogate. It had to be built, I think, for the Northern Horticultural Society, and not to put too fine a point on it, you were the man who built it, really, weren't you?
Yes, there was nothing there really when I went. It was just rough pasture. I'll tell you a story about the farmer leaning over the wall and saying to me, "Nay, lad, you'll not grow anything." He said, "My cow stand up the tits in mud in that lot. You'll not grow anything there." But he was wrong.
Because it was windswept, stony.
Oh, yes.
Carr means stony, doesn't it?
That's right, and or a boggy piece of ground. And what we had to do was blanket the wind out. We sold scrap metal, the lads and I. The Ukrainians want to pack in gardening and go in for scrap metal dealing to get enough.
These were the workers,
money.
Ukrainians.
Oh, yes. Without those two Ukrainians, Harlow Carr wouldn't have been. They were the most ingenious, likeable lads you could possibly have worked with. They got me into more mischief than I care to think about.
But they sold scrap metal to raise money to create the garden.
To get the trees to plant the arboretum. And one of the committee members, a man called Seekson Thompson, a splendid man, found out, and he said, "How much did you raise?" And I said, £150. He said, "I'll double it." And that's how the arboretum, the 10 acres at the far end of the garden, the west side where the wind comes from, was planted.
But a lot of people thought you were on a hiding to nothing, didn't they? A lot of people gave you seeds because they thought,
That's right.
he'll never grow this.
I can remember the man from Downlands Nursery giving me immense support. Sam McCready from Ireland, Billy Douglas, God bless Billy Douglas if ever, sent me enormous quantities of roses. And Dick Milne Redhead from Holden Clough Nursery gave me £1,000 worth of alpines over the years. Now, this sort of support you can't buy.
So all these experts were trying to help you. They were challenging you, but they were encouraging you as well.
I bathed in a rich soup of horticulture. The best brains in gardening came to Harlow Carr. Willie Laycock on North American things like short ears and Shizer cordons and epigea repens, all these things that are difficult to grow. I grew short ears at Harlow out of ignorance. I had them in a bed in what we call birchwood too. And they grew like the green bay tree. Difficult, rare plants. I didn't know about it. I just grew them like anything else. And then the Scottish Rock Garden Club came round. And they were down on their hands and knees. "How do you do it?" And I started taking care of them, and they all died, which proved something. But
so it was your creation, though, this really. I mean, obviously with help, but...
with guiding hands from real gardeners.
But basically, you grew it, and as you've said yourself, it grew you.
And we built it, yes, with stone pulled off the moor, you see.
But you became, as you've said, autocratic about it.
Oh, you do.
Do you think you overstepped the mark? You fell out with the committee, didn't you?
No, that wasn't over the making of the garden. That was over putting a motel on the edge of the garden and giving part of the garden away to the hoteliers. It fell through, but, oh no, that was the sad part. I should have left immediately instead of waiting 2 years to give my notice in.
But you did go in the end. It must have broken your heart.
Not really. It was I was having to work too much in an office.
Next piece of music.
Oh, the Volga boat. Yes, the Volga, we must have that. The Ukrainians again. We did a lot of hard work. We had to lift big stones on a block and tackle. And the Ukrainians thought the Volga boatman was just right when you're heaving on a train, on a chain rather. The rhythm is just right. And they taught us the words, as they told me. And it was Dobrytsetsa. And this went on for, I think, 18 months, 2 years, until one day we were hauling a big stone upon the stream side, and a woman walking across the other side of the stream suddenly stopped, looked absolutely startled out of her wits, came back, said something to me I didn't understand, and I pointed to Johnny. And a great flood of, I presume, Polish or Ukrainian. And Johnny didn't look up. His ears went bright red under his cap. And when she'd gone, I said, what was all that about? He said, well, she was saying that she'd never heard 6 men complimenting her on the quality of her breast at the top of her voices before. And apparently Dobrytsetsa doesn't mean what I thought it meant. After that, we stuck to yo-ho, heave-ho. I thought that's safer.
The Volga Boatman song. You've done so much broadcasting, Geoffrey, radio and television, food for thought, Gardener's Question Time, of course, Mr. Smith's Vegetable Garden, Geoffrey Smith's World of Flowers, and so on. You've done, particularly on television, I think, some of the longest and most fluent pieces to camera I've ever seen. I saw you, for example, describe about how the peony got its name. Would you learn it? Would you write it first? How would you do it?
No. I tell you about that peony at the Temple of Apollo. I got up very early in the morning to get the mood of the thing, and I walked up on the hills. I felt history seeping through my very pores, and I was more, I think, of that era than I was myself. And talking about how Apollo, he needed an assistant, and this lad, Pian, came to help him. Got to be so good that the old boy got jealous. But Pian, fortunately, had healed Pluto, the big chief in the underworld, of a mortal wound. And Pluto discovered that the lad was going to be murdered, and he changed him into a flower. And that flower was the peony. And that's why peonies have healing in all the parts, you see.
You say you felt history, within you. It's true, isn't it, that people have been gardening since, I don't know, forever.
Since Adam was a lad,
Yes.
Yes. And that we are part. And particularly when you're cultivating certain flowers, peonies are one. But I think more than anything else, grapes and figs are the two things that speak to me, and as if I'm holding hands with sort of Pliny the Elder and all the other ancient gardeners.
Record number 7.
Oh, this is Piper in the Meadow. That was the signature tune for the Mr. Smith programme. And the memories that conjures up. Do you know where I first heard it? I was playing cricket for Troon down in Cornwall, and the lads had gone off to have a couple of beers. And I walked up over the sward above Falmouth, and there was I think it was the Truro Silver Band Youth Orchestra playing. And I was watching the Red Wings, the sailing dinghies coming across the bay. And I suddenly heard this music, and I thought, that's magic. And then we were down at Sharston, and they were cutting the programmes together, because there was 10 programmes in each of the series. And I was larking about, and I thought Arthur Smith, the cameraman, had put his camera away. I had a marrow over my shoulder now, swaggering down the path and whistling Piper in the Meadow. And Brian Davis said, "It fits your footsteps. We'll use it."
Piper in the Meadow, played by the Yorkshire Imperial Band, conducted by Major Peter Parks. Now here's some desert island questions for you, Geoffrey. What's the most important tool or aid that a gardener has?
It's got to be a knife, hasn't it? You could make everything else except a really good knife. And it's astonishing. People say spades and push hoes, but you could carve a spade out of wood, couldn't you? Or chip one out of flint. But a knife, to me, would be the indispensable tool.
And if you could only garden vegetables, which would you choose?
I would have to have... No, I would grow brassicas. Yes, I would grow cabbages and cauliflowers. Because when they flower, they're beautiful, they're good to eat. And out of one brassica oleracea, I could propagate cauliflowers, sprouting broccoli, second only in quality to asparagus, cabbages. You could get the whole lot out of one. And think of the fun of hybridising, playing with the butterflies.
And if you could only grow one flower?
Primrose. That's the thread right through. John Clare had it, you know, when he said, "It's the flowers that we plucked as we sat on the doorstep that remain our love right through the rest of our lives." And he was talking about daisies, or daisy eyes. But primroses, I've known primroses, they are so complete. The quality of the flower, the gentle loveliness, the perfume, that marriage between green of leaf and soft yellow of flower. Yeah, and they're so optimistic, primroses, aren't they?
Last record.
Treorchy, the male voice choir. I wish I could sing. I remember going to listen to the Treorchy in the Royal Hall in Harrogate. And they sang, and they sang. And then the caretakers wanted to shut the shop up and go home. And the master of ceremonies came to the front of the stage and he said, "We've got to go now." But he said, "If you all come to the pub across the road," he said, "we'll go on singing there."
The Treorchy Male Choir singing Psalm 23, "The Lord is my Shepherd," conducted by John Cunnan-Jones. If you could only take one of those 8 records, Geoffrey, which one would you take?
Dawn Chorus.
Would you?
It's the only one you wouldn't get tired of.
What about your book, as well as the Bible and Shakespeare?
I want the history of viticulture, of vine growing, with instructions on how to make the wine.
Is that connected then with your luxury?
I want you to go out to the best vineyard you can find and bring me back a bundle of the prunings. And then I would spend the years learning a whole new skill, planting a vineyard. I know how to prune grapes, harvesting the grapes, making the wine, and then in the evening, Sue, I would sit on the beach on a comfortable chair, made by myself, and I'd watch the sun go down, and I would sip a glass of my own wine, and I would think of all the people rushing around in the world, sucking in traffic fumes, busy to death, stressed out of the mind. Now, thank you for dropping me on the desert island.
Geoffrey Smith, thank you very much indeed for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
Visit bbc.co.uk/Radio4.